All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone. This is Ada from Oncito. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. Today, we're going to talk about 5 tips for better website optimization and compliance. Not a fun topic, but it has to be addressed. So for those of you that want live captions, feel free to toggle this on via Zoom. They have live transcription available. For those of you that were not able to make to this webinar, you will have the recording and the slides after the sessions, and the recording will also have closed captioning. If you have any questions during or after this webinar, feel free to post any questions in the chat or in the Q&A section here um, in this conversation. So the agenda for today is I want to talk about website optimization versus web compliance and the main differences. We'll also give you some tips around how to navigate around those specific topics. There will be some key takeaways from today's webinar as well. Some materials, some collateral for you to use and share between your teams. And of course, I'll be going through any questions at the end of this webinar. It's ad time. This webinar is proudly presented and supported by Moncito, our, um, our platform that basically has a way of perfecting your website experience across all functionalities. As you can see, we have been working really hard in expanding our business from Australia, from US, from Denmark, where we started about 8 to 9 years ago. And I have been personally responsible for that growth in the Asia Pacific region. So I'm not sure if there is many here from Singapore, Malaysia, India, or any other countries in Southeast Asia, but it's specifically dedicated to them. And some of the customers that we work with have been using Moncito to make sure that their website experience is always the highest. First of all, I would like to start this with a quick poll. I know we're already half into the 2022 year, but I was kind of hoping to understand what your main website priorities are. For those of you that are going to go into a website redesign, good luck with that. For some of you, it might be just really improving the user experience and a few minor things on the website. It could be growing website traffic. It could be addressing website accessibility. For those of you who don't know, website accessibility is basically allowing us to have a website that can be used by people with disabilities, whether that's a permanent, visual, a temporary disability. And of course, the last one that I hear a lot personally from speaking with organizations across Asia Pacific, it's mostly around customer acquisition and lead generation. So I'm going to post this poll, and if any of you would like to respond to that, that would be great. So I'll give you a few seconds to do that right now. All right. Looks like user experience is the one that's leading here, which is probably why you're sitting in on this webinar. Sounds good. It sounds good. I see there's some redesigns. Customer acquisition is actually not the highest here. But that looks like we have a clear winner here, which is improving the user experience. All righty, sounds good. So I'm gonna go and share these results. So now I want to talk about the definitions of optimization and compliance, because there seems to be a disconnect there in terms of what is it that we exactly want to achieve, what are our priorities. When we come across customers that tell us that they purely want to optimize their website, they're thinking of, well, I want to do a redesign, I want to make the UX nicer, I want to change my navigation bar, or I want to make sure that the journeys are logical and clear to those that want to make sure there's some sort of actioning happening. So website optimization is really about improving your website that is effective for your visitors. Local communities, specifically for government agencies or local and federal agencies, including councils. It's really for you to identify any of these challenges for your visitors that have a hard time navigating and finding the information that they really need. On the other hand, we have website compliance. This is to make sure that your website meets accepted standards. And this could be anything ranging from the accessibility standards. We can also look at it from for financial institutions and insurance companies that have to follow certain standards set by the central bank or the Monetary Authority of Singapore. It could be the Hong Kong Monetary Authority as well. So there's certain standards that they need to comply with, which isn't the fun part of monitoring your website for, but it is something that we would have to consider. And there is a very thin line between those two and how to make sure that your website is both. So why do we need to take this into account? In terms of website optimization, because your website is the one place that people go to for any types of information, or to buy something or perform an action, or to fill in a form for you to contact them, it is a trustworthy source. So we want to make sure that that is always optimized, that is always monitored, and that there's no issues on the website. It needs to be easy to use, of course. It needs to have a good user experience, but also at the same time, I see a lot of teams spending a lot of time on this, and oftentimes too much time on this, while they could reduce their manual labor around admin work that is done day to day. We want to, I mean, at Monsito, we promote inclusivity and accessibility. So we do believe that every website should be accessible for everyone, regardless of their disability, regardless of their temporary disabilities, native languages, those who don't speak English as their first language. It can be a little bit difficult for them to be able to digest all of that information. And that's why we're making sure that this is on the top of your list as well. In terms of compliance, it's typically required by law. There's different laws, various by the different jurisdictions and countries. A little bit more stricter in the US and Canada, in Europe where you're bound by GDPR, in Singapore, in Malaysia. Not so much for corporate organizations, except of course there's the PDPA law again, which we'll talk a little bit later about. But it's not necessarily required by the law. Sometimes it could be a commonly accepted industry standard. For example, making sure that, based on the last core web vitals of Google, that our website needs to load in less than 3 seconds, for example. So these are standards that everyone is trying to achieve to make sure that their rankings are higher by the SEO standards. Let's dive into the tips. So for the last 4 years that I have been at Monsito and building the Asia Pacific region, it's been a really difficult job for me to educate and promote web accessibility. It isn't something that it's still fairly new, so it hasn't been easy, but I do want to highlight that we shouldn't skip it. There's about 3,000 people living with a disability in Singapore specifically, about 20% in Australia. And it's something that we would need to address. This is something that government agencies in Singapore do very well, as they believe that all Singaporean citizens should have access to an accessible website, to be able to find any new policies, to be able to find any new announcements from the health directory or any government agencies and what they're entitled to. So in order for us to do that, we would need to have sort of an automated approach or a hybrid approach towards finding all of those issues and achieving full accessibility. It is at the end of the day, it's your responsibility as a website owner, and you're accountable to bringing that for the general public. It is mandated in the US, so if you do have any businesses here that are targeting the US market or the European market, it is mandatory according to the Americans with Disabilities Act. So it is the right thing to do as well. Many when they start with accessibility and going through all the issues and reviewing their content, they pretty much think it's, we'll fix all of this and then we forget about it. It should be a continuous process. It is something that needs to be done on a regular basis, especially when new content is added or changed or archived. So we want to make sure that we maintain that compliance when new content comes up on the website. And of course, for those of you, it's really important to document all of that progress, because if you have an accessibility statement on your website, usually somewhere in the footer that says um, accessibility statement, we should have the ability to show to the public that we are working on this. If you do get a complaint that something isn't working, you could always show an audit log or a history of the fixes that you've done to showcase your progress, to showcase that you do care, and that way we will allow people to submit any suggestions or errors so that we can address them. The second key takeaway is that data privacy is it's really all we hear about these days. Recently had some issues with Google Analytics that some of their data from an Austrian bank went into the United States, which was a big violation. So obviously, personal data needs to be protected, especially when people fill in their details or fill in forms, leave their personal details around. So we want to make sure if you do have these on the website, then you must have a privacy policy. And of course, if you use cookies on the website as well, then you must give the users the choice or whether they want to be tracked, whether they want to subscribe to the marketing emails, whether they want to be recorded for heat maps purposes if someone here is using them. So that is pretty important if we want to if you want to use that data as well. So if you do any business or if you have a website that is tailored towards European residents, we want to make sure that we are compliant with the GDPR rules. In Australia, we have the Australian Privacy Act, or APA. We could also look at California Privacy Act if you do have some targets for the US. But basically, for the Australian one, the users can opt out of their data being sold to third parties, which should be a choice, which should be an option for them to be able to take. So that is something that we should go through and optimize it for our website. The third key takeaway this is something that we recently added to our portfolio. So we've merged with a company called Archive Social. And we want to make sure that if you are requested or if you are compliant, need to have some sort of compliance with public records requests, we are able to basically archive any of your social media comments, any of the deleted comments as well and posts. It's related to the Freedom of Information Act. So if you do get any requests or if you do get a court hearing or if you are more interested in the sentiment of your visitors towards your brand, towards your company, towards any of the information that you publish, then you are able to archive all of your social media channels and be able to retrieve any of that information at any time. And that way we also be able to understand if there is any recommendations we can take in specifically for local governments. It could be anything about again, how visitors feel about your brand and what they publish on those social media channels. I think the one thing this slide specifically, it talks about visitor and industry expectations. Of course, beyond the legal and the regulatory compliance, we also have so many other things to focus on when it comes down to our website. Website speed loading time is pretty important. That is something that I see everyone focusing on, purely because um, we have all these beautiful websites with a really nice UX, with really nice banners, carousels, images, and content as well. But it also slows down the website significantly, which the SEO suffers from. So there's a fine balance between those two, and that's why we have to consider it and make sure that we really start digging in into the back end and start to see if there is any common scripts or images that we can reduce and optimize to make the website load faster. There are some things that we could look at in terms of branding and styling of our website. So a lot of the websites seem to be built for our desktops, but also we want to make sure that they are mobile friendly and tablet friendly, that there is no overlapping text, that there is no um, images or CTA buttons where we can't see the text or the content itself. So that's been pretty much on a lot of people's priority list in addressing aesthetic errors on their website, especially when you're going through a redesign and starting to migrate any of that content as well as any of the style sheets. So that does need to be considered as well. Of course, we have the professional design. Again, if you do plan to address accessibility, just make sure that you can't follow all of the rules, because at the end of the day, if we make everything accessible, we will have a very ugly looking website. So that's where the line needs to be drawn between perfect UX or full accessibility. Um, we in terms of content, there's a few things we can do. So we want to make sure that the content is readable, that it's digestible, that we don't have long paragraphs, long sentences, and language that isn't, um, I guess, very difficult to read for those who's it's not the first language. So for me personally, English isn't my first language. When I visit insurance companies' websites, it can be a little bit difficult to understand how to manage my own super fund or how to sign up for a loan. So that needs to be reviewed as well. We want to make sure there's no broken links, no misspellings, no broken images, because again, when we as visitors come across such errors and not have the ability to kind of go back and get what we need, we tend to leave and go somewhere else. So that is something that we want to achieve as well. In terms of branding and styling consistency, I kind of touched upon that already. But what we want to do is to ensure that your brand is represented in the best way possible. And there's certain things that we encourage our customers to do, including making sure there's no offensive language on the website, making sure that we have plenty of CTA buttons that are visible and available, so that they're seen and people take actions, but also beyond that. So once they do click on that CTA button, what happens next? How long does it take for them to be redirected to a form? How long does it take for them to be redirected to a choice of products or packages or services? So that's how we can track and make sure that all of that is consistent, rather than just have a really nice landing page with a CTA button. um, Simple navigation is one part of it. I think that's, when we come to a website, we know exactly what we need, we know exactly what we're looking for, and if that navigation isn't there, and if the journey is broken, or if the journey goes elsewhere, this is something to consider for us when we talk about visitor and visitor expectations. The last key takeaway is user experience. As I mentioned already, it has to be intuitive, it has to be clean. Again, when I see um, some people trying to, when there's just too many chefs, um, and they are all trying to contribute to the website, it's okay to tell no to certain things, to certain elements on the website, because they should align with your strategy. They should have a reason to be there on the website. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to agree with everything and sacrifice our user experience for that. Again, as I mentioned, you could make everything accessible, you could make everything compliant, but just make sure that you also don't neglect the user experience and design and everything else that makes it modern and cool looking. And in terms of the CTAs, they should be repeated across the website. When I see CTAs on website that are at the bottom of the list, and when you look through a mobile phone and you have to scroll through for a good 15 seconds to see the CTA, this isn't the best experience. So we should have them somewhere visible. We should have them at the top of the page, and we should be reminded of it more frequently. So what you can do at the moment to see how your website is performing is see what compliance regulations apply to you, first of all. If you're a bank or insurance company, we would look at ASIC here in Australia, or in Malaysia, it would be the BNM. In Singapore, it would be MAS or IRAS. In Hong Kong, HKMA, and in India, it would be the Central Bank of India. So if that applies to you, great. If you're a corporate organization or an e-commerce organization selling to multiple countries, we want to make sure that our website is accessible for people in other regions, even if it's not a regulation in your own country. Same for any government agencies here, local government, federal and state government. Accessibility would be one of the regulations, as well as any personal data protection regulations as well. By auditing your website, you would be able to understand whether you're compliant, whether you need some improvements, or whether you've completely failed. And that's where the work starts, basically. And it's not typically easy to go through and auditing a website, because maybe back in the days, a website would be 100 to 200 pages, but these days there's just so much content, and we have websites ranging from 500 to 100,000 pages. So it's very difficult to go through all these compliance issues overnight, but also in a manual way. So we need to prioritize somewhere. And a few of these prioritization um, suggestions would be to really look at your most popular content first, and that is prioritized purely based on traffic. We are looking at most visited pages, most downloaded documents, and these will be prioritized first, because we don't want to start with pages and documents that haven't been seen in years, especially for those of you that archive a lot of your content. And of course, I mean, it's very straightforward, but we have to go after the low-hanging fruit. We will start with, the most simple task to get out of the way. And one of the examples is something that everyone can do, including content teams, is adding an alternate text or an alt text short for your images. For those that don't know, it's a short description of what the image is depicting, what the image is about, so that people that have visual disability would be able to understand that there is an arrow here, that there is a logo here, or that there is an office meeting on the photo. And then we go and tackle the more difficult, complex task, and we bring in more human resources and more people in to really address any of those compliance issues. It's really yeah, a lot of the businesses seem to think that compliance is, it's something nice to have. It's something that we can do later. It's not usually on their priorities until it's too late, obviously. So it is good to make this incorporate this into your strategic plan, whether that's still for this year, if you have a 6-month plan or a quarterly plan, something potentially for next year, to indicate this as part of your KPIs. Sorry. Stephanie, I will answer your questions at the end, if that's okay. So we want to make sure that we incorporate compliance into your KPIs as part of your strategy, but also you will all probably have a compliance team or a quality assurance team. For those of you that don't have it, it might be you can connect with us, so we can maybe give you some tips as well on certain regulations that are quite common or that we know of, just because speaking to our customers. But if you do, it is great to meet with them and involve them, because typically what I hear is customers, they would chat with their legal team to update a cookie banner, or they would chat or email with their compliance team, and there seems to be some miscommunication there of what the legal team or the compliance team is actually requiring us to do. So it is great to go and actually involve them and work on this together. Um, as I mentioned with accessibility, it's good to document your ongoing compliance. That way you show to your visitors, your customers, your potential customers that you care, that you are working on it. So if there is any complaints still about something not working on your website, which typically happens because accessibility is not 100%. It's not a 100% compliance project. So if there is anything, make sure that you have an audit log. Make sure that you have a compliance history, so that we could share with our visitors that we are doing the right thing and we're on the path of improving our website. And also consider a web archiving solution if you are regulated, if you are worried about any of those comments, bad press, bad comments about your company. So you can always go back and prove that we have been compliant at a specific point in time, and here is the proof for that. So I'm just going to summarize the key takeaways again. Make sure you have different approaches for website optimization and compliance, again, because you can't focus on one or the other. You would have to find a hybrid solution for both, and make sure that you're both compliant, but also have a nice website for your visitors. If you're a webmaster or admin, it's really great to have some personal development, but also it would be great to hold your content editors accountable, to make sure that you educate them, to make sure that you share your knowledge with them around the best practices, and also to involve your quality assurance or compliance team to educate them again on any new regulations or violations that possibly could cause any legal issues or any compliance issues. We would recommend to set aside some time for regular maintenance on a weekly or monthly basis, especially when it comes to regular content issues like broken links, misspellings, on-page SEO issues, accessibility issues, performance of certain, the page loading time of certain pages, especially if they're prioritized, to make sure that we review them and to see if we're on track towards meeting certain compliance levels. And of course, that speaks for itself to kind of dedicate some time to website optimization. It's not always possible, but if you do have the time to meet with the team to really truly discuss how we can improve the user experience based off our visitors' recommendations, or from someone new who joined the company, they're typically the ones that are really good in giving you some feedback around your website. We've prepared some resources and tools for you to get started. If you're interested, we have some case studies that have been published on our website. And if you're really keen to read a bit more about the Essential Website Compliance Handbook, our marketing team has done a great job in putting this together. So feel free to download the ebook and read more about all the different things that I've talked about today at a very high level. There's also some webinars that we could have a look at, or view my recorded webinar. Any other governance handbooks, we've got some specifically on accessibility, on color contrast checkers, specifically for admins or webmasters or managers. So there's different resources to help you along. Now, time for another ad again. If you would like to receive some consultation and for us to give you some suggestions based on what we talked about today, we are able to offer you a free scan of your website, where we will go through together with you and your team, look through all of the issues, all of the suggestions, all of the opportunities for you to work on, and we will specifically look at the compliance levels for privacy, for accessibility, for on-page SEO, how you're tracking in terms of performance, as in page loading time, some nitty-gritty stuff like broken links and misspellings. So if you want, I'm more than happy to post a poll here again, and we'll be able to get this across. So I'm just going to publish this. So feel free if you're interested in a free scan. One of our team members will reach out after the webinar. We'll start the scan of your URL, and a 20 to 30-minute booking will be put through, and then probably it will be probably me walking you through the entire platform and show you all of your issues. So I'm really excited about that. But any questions from anyone here, feel free to add this into the Q&A or in the chat so I can go through and answer them. So we've got a question here for any good resources for alt text. Let me just, all right. Any good resource for alt text? How long and detailed should be? Should we include in hyperlink if the image asset is linked? So with the alt text, sometimes I see very short descriptions and sometimes I see very long descriptions. So the longer and detailed it is, the better, of course, because that would really describe the full picture of what is going on. Should we include a hyperlink if the image asset is linked? That is something that I need to take back and discuss with my team. However, I would say probably not the best to do it, because then the screen reader would read out a bunch of gibberish, including pixels and letters and slashes and so on. So typically what a good alt text would be is a long, detailed one written out in its words. Any recommendations for maintaining content for non-English speaking customers to ensure? Yes. So for those that don't speak English, obviously they would look for things that are easy to read. Typically, the recommendations are using bullet points where we can, making our sentences shorter, using less words. There is also some resources, Melissa, that I'm happy to share with you on that was released. It's a style guideline released by the Australian government with difficult words. Words like aggregated, words like leverage, words like ascertain. These words can be very difficult to understand by non-English speakers, and we are able to give you some replacement words that are a little bit more easier to understand. So that's one way of doing things, is in order to present it in a nice way, we have to use bullet points, shorter paragraphs, shorter sentences, but then also from a terminology point, we would have to replace all the difficult words into understandable ones. We have a look. Why is 404 page tracked as the same title page in Monsito SEO compliance issues? And how should we name the 404 page? Okay, I'm not quite sure if I understand the question. So a 404 is a broken link. So as the same title page. So Guna, I believe when if we look at purely Monsito and the on-page SEO, we have the ability to find pages with a missing header, missing title, or duplicate titles. So as a best practice, we should have a unique title for all of our pages. That way we narrow the search. That way we want to make sure that the visitors land exactly where they need to be. And if it is marked as a 404, might be something that you have removed, a page that's been removed or archived, and you specifically said that the page isn't found and it's a 404 code. So that's probably why it appears in the on-page SEO, even though it shouldn't be there. So my recommendation would be to go into your CMS and completely remove that page, even if it's hidden or archived. Any other questions? No, doesn't look like it. All right, then. Well, thank you so much for joining this call. I hope you learned some new things about optimizing your website and compliance, of course. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, or um, you could always access this webinar and the recording of it as well. So, oh, I have one more question. Performance tab. Performance tab. Marciano, what is exactly your question around the performance tab? Okay, doesn't look like I'm getting an answer here. But okay, showing mobile presentations when selecting desktop in dashboard. Okay, so one way you can see the perform, or I guess not the performance, but the UX through a desktop or through a mobile presentation is by using heat maps. So you could see how it looks like on a mobile screen, because on the phone you only have that one big screen with some space that you could share as much as possible. But obviously people don't, as they kind of scroll down, you will see people dropping off. um, in the performance, not keep in the performance where we measure page loading time, we are able to check for mobile connection and for desktop connection. So for mobile it would be 4G and 3G, and also the desktop from different locations including Singapore, US, Europe, and in Sydney in Australia here. Yes. I hope I answered all of your questions. Okay. Marciana, I might reach out to you after this webinar and set this up for you for desktop. So it looks like we mobile works, but you don't have a profile for desktop, so I'll do that. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, thank you so much for joining again. I hope you enjoy your day, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any additional questions. And we'll be reaching out to you for those that are interested in a free scan. And I'll be talking to you very soon. Thank you, guys. Bye.